Hello and welcome to Bloke on the Range, and it's the winter season here now, so it's time to yeet all these modern drastic plastic fancies and get back to some serious Enfield nerdery of the type we haven't had for quite a long time on the channel. Now, if you remember a while back, I showed off this fully fledged sterling conversion of a No.4 to 7.62 NATO. I've not been able to manage to source the Enfield equivalent, which is an L8, A1 to A5. What I do have though is an L39 A1, which in the bit that we're interested in, the bit that counts, is the same as an L8 A1 with the exception of, well, it doesn't have the rear sight, but and it doesn't have a charger guide, but So what we can do is we can look at what the differences are, and I think I can explain why. And some of this will be new information. Now, in the Lee-Enfield story by Ian Skennerton, there's all sorts of comments regarding the L8s, and I've not seen any evidence for some of them. I think some of it is a bit of confusion with the L42, and I think some of it is just range fuddle. Sorry, Ian S, not Ian M. So anyway, let's just do a quick overview of this one because we've seen it before, but link in the description. So what we've got here is we have an absolutely standard rear sight. We have a different extractor for the rimless cartridge, because if you remember, a Lee-Enfield actually ejects empty cases by friction against the sidewall. So this claw hooks into the rim and pushes it to the side. They'll extract fine, but won't eject with a 303 extractor. What we've got on this side of the rifle is an auxiliary ejector for ejecting the shorter, empty, complete cartridges. We've got a little stud there that pushes through. It's spring loaded. That works quite well. And we've got this magazine, and we'll look at them both in detail. We have a barrel made in Belgium, and basically that's it. One of the things I don't agree with in the Lee-Enfield story is that there's a claim that the conversion kit had a separate bolt head. I see no evidence of this. This is a totally standard Fazakerley bolt head. There's nothing funny about that, and there's actually no reason to. There's no recessed anything. There's nothing clever going on in the bolt heads there. So, moving now to our surrogate L8. Please excuse the target sight. These old screws are a bit tight. I don't want to risk stripping them or stripping the terrible hex head in there. So the L8, that is an L8 rear sight, and I will point out the salient points of that later. We have the 19-ton proof mark showing that this has gone through a 19-ton proof. This is not, again, it's not a special bolt head. This is just a standard. This is a standard Maltby bolt head. All that means is that it has gone through the 19 British ton, Imperial ton service pressure proof for 7.62 NATO /308 Win. We've got again a longer extractor of a different design. I'm not sure whether this is the original one. I suspect it is, but I have a loose 1965 Enfield one here, and again, look at that closely in a minute. Coming down here, we have no modification in the boltway. We don't have an auxiliary extractor there. Ejector, sorry. And what we do have, and this is the interesting part, is that we have the ejector on the magazine. And this is interesting. And the magazine design is different as well. If we turn these two upside down, we can get some light in there. The upper rifle, the sterling conversion, is unmodified from 303, and on the, that's the best light angle, on the L8 surrogate, we've got machining, and I've got a diagram here showing the machining that's done in order to fit this different magazine design. Sometimes you find that the L8 and L42 magazines will fit unmodified, sometimes they don't. It's always a tolerance stacking issue. So let us start with the small parts. Now, essentially there's a different profile on these. The top one on the Sterling, bottom one is Enfield, and the Sterling has a double bevel on the front of the extractor, and the Enfield does not. There's a slight difference in the side profile as well. I think this is probably the original, but there's slight differences. I wonder if there wasn't variation during the manufacturing run. There's a bit of a bevel on the top there isn't on the Sterling one. That's not the most interesting information, but it's there for completeness, so your mileage may vary. So moving on to the charger guide, the Sterling one is this quite substantial block fitted and permanently attached, screwed to the top of the receiver, and it has nubs to catch a NATO charger. This is all very, very chunky and well designed. The Enfield one, on the other hand, is this little pressed piece of metal that fits in here. This does not fit in this rifle. It would need a little bit of gunsmith attention and persuasion, but it fits in there, and then it was drilled through and riveted to be a permanent fixture, and there are no nubs. And the interesting thing is that it will block the charger, but it won't stop it sliding forwards, whereas the Sterling one properly captures it, and the nubs are formed there in those corners. And this is by far the more substantial solution, but kind of expensive, because that's a properly machined component which requires modification of the rifle, drilling and tapping and so on. Just as an aside, weight for weight, that's possibly one of the most expensive pieces of firearms metal I own. The other expensive one being an original USMC front sight protector from 1903 Springfield. Onto the magazine design now. Sterling, Enfield. The profile is different, the reinforcing ribs are different, and there's actually quite a lot of difference in the design here. Now, if we start with the Sterling one, we've got ribs here that are positioned to fit the shoulders, and in practice it does stop the cartridges popping forward. I was a bit worried. It is possible to screw it up deliberately and push them in too far forward, and then you will get horrible damage, because if you look there, there's a lip that the round can get under. But in practice, loading from chargers or loading with good practice of insert and push back, I've never had a problem in reality, and I ran this in the mini Winter Brutality last year, and it worked fine. And this works absolutely fine like that. It's designed to fit in the rifle without modification of the receiver. So the Sterling conversion, the only receiver modification is for the charger bridge and the auxiliary ejector, and in a lot of the conversions, commercial conversions, like done by Charnwood and done by various gunsmiths, just using the kits, because both Sterling and Enfield supplied kits with a barrel and a basically you can do it with a barrel, a magazine and an extractor, and they're all available on the market. You don't need the charger bridge, and you don't need the auxiliary ejector. They're just nice to have. Now the Enfield magazine has an auxiliary feed ramp, which is handy. So this one stops the rounds going too far forward by just having this insert welded into the front there. That just means that there's just not enough room for them to go forward. That is quite good. And then we have this ejector here rather than on the rifle. And you can see quite clearly that the lips on the Enfield one are higher, which is why we need those relief cuts in here, there, and it's very, very difficult to get this in the light, and there, on both sides. And the bubber solution, if you can't be bothered to do that, I have one here that has been bubbered, is to file them down, file the lips down. This is the real village cricket version. File the top of the extractor and just force fit it like that. That is a horror bag. That's on a Parker Hale T4 target rifle kit, which I don't believe was put together by Parker Hale because of things like that. I believe that is a kit build. And now we get to the really interesting nerdy part, and we solve a mystery from the channel from a while back. Now this is a standard milled Mark 1 rear sight on the left, a Savage one, just so happens to be. And this is the mystery one I was struggling with and wondering why the battle sight range came out at 100, not 400, but the point of impact was the same on the target. Now, okay, this Savage one has a small battle aperture, ignore that. Now, there's all sorts of strange claims in the Lee-Enfield story about a 1,000-yard scaled back sight, but I've never seen one, so we'll put that as a I need some proof. On all of the L8s I've seen and all of the L42s I've seen, it's like this. It's just standard, graduated up to 1,300 yards. The L42s differ in that that's been machined off, but the difference is here. It's the lowered datum line, and that is the only difference. So the slide's been modified or replaced with one with a lowered datum line, and that makes the difference between 400 yards without bayonet and 100 yards without bayonet with 303. The interesting question is why? You'd think just in terms of external ballistics, okay, 303 Mark 7 is 174 grains doing about 2,440 feet per second, and then the British loading of 7.62 NATO is 144 grains doing about 27, somewhere between 27 and 2,800 feet per second. So once it's left the barrel, it flies flatter. But the issue is, what happens before it leaves the barrel? Because as soon as that primer goes off, recoil starts. And these systems are not the most rigid, that is true. And with the light military barrels, the Enfield barrels are different, but that's not so interesting. There's also a claim in Skeleton about some funniness around there, but I've not seen it either. I suspect it might be mixed up with L42. But anyway, there's a whole story around jump, and it's worth a topic all on its own. But the short version is that there's a whole lot that goes on vibrationally and in terms of movement of the rifle as the recoil starts, as the bullet starts to accelerate down the barrel. Yes, it starts as soon as the bullet starts to move because F equals ma, Newton. And basically what happens is that there's a difference between the bore axis before firing and the bore axis, or at least the last part of the bore axis, as the bullet leaves. Now, these shoot dramatically low. So if you just whack a conversion on with the same sights, it will shoot dramatically low. And I've got a standard rear sight on this. Again, there's an allegation that Sterling, I've heard allegations that Sterling would provide a 1,000-yard again, back sight on request. This one has a standard, absolutely stock standard No.4 back sight with the datum line in the normal place. You can't zero it with the standard set. This one, because I'm retaining the rear sight that was in it anyway, I've got the shortest one, and it's still far too long. If you have a look in there, that's what the shortest one, so for the greatest elevation looks like. And the height of all the blades is the same because they're used for ranging. The difference in the sets of the heights is on the base. So the base is either thicker or thinner, and that's as thin as they get. There's no more meat to play around with there. You could file it, but then you lose the ranging capability. And then it's going to look different, and you want it to look the same for all your soldiers. So the solution, if we go back here, was to lower the datum line, and then that puts it back in the normal tolerance range. And that's quite interesting, I think. I think that is the most interesting part of the story, and it solves that old mystery regarding the sight. So I think what I'll do at another time is I'll do a talk on jump. There's a whole thing in the textbook of small arms about it. It was well explored and well measured. So there we go. So there's one other thing that said a lot about the sights that I'm rather sceptical of, and I'll explain why. Now, it's often reported that yeah, they won't rescale because the flatter 7.62 ballistics was close enough if you read meters for yards out to about 800. Now, we're talking early 60s here, and the SLR was being produced with a sight scaled in yards. The way they converted British fixed distance, known distance ranges from yards to meters was changing yards to meters on the signs. They didn't change the actual ranges. The army didn't seem to go over to using meters for ranging until later. Now that's something that would make sense in terms of the rather later L42 sniper rifles, which were the thick end of a decade after the L8s. That will make some degree of sense. Highly skeptical about it regarding the L8, particularly in terms of all the other claims going around about 1,000 meter back sights and rescaling and all sorts of things like that. So now we get to the really interesting portion. Okay, so what happened timing wise was Sterling got there first, and there was obviously a big potential market because No.4s have been given out like sweeties to all and sundry, not only within the Commonwealth, but after the war, the Dutch had a load, the Belgians had a load. We're just giving them away, loads of them. So there was a whole huge quantity of base rifles that were suitable for a relatively cheap conversion to 7.62 as reserve rifles, or for poorer countries who already had No.4s or could buy them on the surplus market for next to nothing, to come up to date with the new modern cartridge. And obviously for Renfi types, it would have been kind of great. SLRs were really, really expensive compared to these conversions. So there was a market with the British Army, and there was a market elsewhere. Why didn't Enfield just talk to Sterling and use their system? Well, the blood was super bad between Enfield and Sterling at this point, because Sterling had their submachine gun adopted, the Sterling No.4 as the L2A3, and the issue is that the government basically said, thanks for the subgun, we're going to go build them ourselves. And Sterling were like, what? And they were like, yeah, we're like the government and stuff, so screw you hippies. And Sterling had protected the key components of their submachine gun, and of course took them to court. Basically, they didn't want to pay any licensing, they didn't want to pay Sterling to produce them. They wanted the Fazakerley factory, which had previously been producing No.4, or still producing No.4s at the end of the run there. They wanted to keep that running, they didn't want to pay Sterling a penny, they had to be sued for it. So the blood was up. And the blood was still bad in the 80s once we get onto the SA-80 story. So Sterling, being a commercial concern who had just been screwed over, files a patent on this system. Now, these are kind of toe curling. Reading these old ones, it's kind of toe curling compared to modern standards. But let's just quickly have a little look at the figures here. So some of this we're recognizing. The magazine looks very, very similar. We've got explaining the difference between the shape of the cartridges. We've got the charger guide. What we've got here, interestingly, rather than the way it was done in the final thing, is we have a little notch. I guess that didn't work very well. And then some different extractor. And this isn't the standard NATO charger, but that's what they were looking at. Now, there's another big topic is patents. What we do with a patent is we read the claims, the independent claims. And a claim is a set of limitations that defines what is protected. We only go looking in the description is if something's unclear and like, what do they actually mean by that? But in principle, they should stand on their own. The dependent claims we actually don't care about for infringement purposes. It's either in the independent claims or not. And yeah, as I said, these are kind of toe curling, and we have 3 independent claims here. So let us nerd out. Let's try the first one. A magazine rifle of the kind described, wherein to enable rimless type 7.62mm ammunition to be used instead of .303 rimmed type ammunition, the barrel is replaced or resized to provide a reduced bore, and the barrel rechambered to suit the new ammunition. This is so toe curling. A magazine is provided of dimensions to contain a plurality of rounds of rimless ammunition, and an extractor device is also provided having a claw designed to engage in the groove of the rimless cartridge and bias the cartridge towards the side of the rifle, provided with an ejector device. Well, I think we've just explained why the ejector device is not on the rifle there. A magazine rifle comprising a barrel of 7.62mm bore, a detachable magazine constructed to contain a plurality of rimless cartridges in staggered relationship with means to prevent relative displacement thereof. That would be the ribs here, but also we have the plate in the front there. An adapter fitted to the bridge of the rifle to accommodate a standard rimless ammunition loading clip, recesses or niches formed internally of the said adapter to engage projections on the side of the clip to arrest its movement and facilitate its ejection. I think we've now explained why this does not have notches. We'd like to try on a real L8 just to see if they'll eject, but I suspect they won't eject because it's not got notches, because the ejection of the clip works because it can pivot like that. Anyway, back at the really exciting plot. An extractor device having a claw formed to engage the annular groove near the base of a rimless cartridge and to deflect the extracted cartridge towards the side of the rifle where the ejector device is situated, and a projection or recess in the boltway to engage the base of the cartridge to assist in ensuring its positive ejection. So our projection is our little auxiliary ejector here that pokes out there. And yeah, I think we have now completely explained why there's that difference in construction. The last one is an omnibus claim, which is an old sort of British/Empire thing. A magazine rifle constructed, arranged and adapted to operate substantially as herein described with reference to figures 3 to 10 of the accompanying drawings. Very little significance. All that can possibly prevent is like a one-to-one copy. And in fact, this isn't one-to-one with the drawings really. Omnibus claims, we don't do them anymore. They are not really a thing anymore. So yeah, as you can imagine, this resulted in legal action that was eventually sorted out. But I think having been able to describe the reason, having been able to work out the reasons for these differences, I think that's actually quite interesting. I'm a total nerd on this sort of thing though, so your mileage may vary. So there you have it. I hope that total nerdgasm was at least vaguely interesting. I think we've managed to get to the bottom of some of the whys and wherefores of the Enfield conversions versus the Sterling ones. If this sort of thing floats your boat, then please like and subscribe. Please consider supporting us on Patreon, and see you again sometime. Bye.